Like most teenagers my age, I spend a lot of time thinking about what the future is going to be like. More specifically, I like to imagine what everything's going to look like, from the design of cities, to technology, to fashion. Yet I know that what I visualize for the future probably won't really be like what I imagine at all. After all, no one could have guessed that stores would need to plan for COVID restrictions, and that everyone and their grandma would be on video calls, and that pajamas would become the clothing of choice for so many people. So, in a world where the unexpected happens all the time, you can count on three pillars of good design to stay the same: intuitiveness, familiarity, and honesty. To illustrate what I mean by intuitive design, I first want you to think about the purpose someone designs for. To help with that, let's imagine that you're designing a contraption for an egg drop challenge. What's the first step? Other than the obligatory Google search for best egg drop ideas, you might start by sketching out several designs. But without anything else to guide you, how you narrow down your choices can be a bit arbitrary. Then let's pretend that the lighter the contraption, or maybe the prettier it is, or the simpler it is to make, the more points you get for your design. If you're familiar with the design process, then you know that these are called constraints, which help you narrow down which idea would yield the best result for a given situation. From this example, we can see that the more constraints you have, the more creative you need to be with the design. You can't just stuff an egg in a peanut butter jar and call it a day. The physical form of a design is dictated by the purpose it will serve, which in this case is to protect an egg. Now, you may have heard the saying form follows function, which was coined by architect Louis H. Sullivan all the way back in 1896. Think about that saying for a second. Many people tend to misinterpret the saying, especially because the word follow has several definitions depending on the way it's used. Sullivan wasn't implying that when designing something, function should be the utmost priority and aesthetics aren't that important. If that was the case, then every building would have the same brutalist style. The phrase means that in good design, the physical appearance of that design results from whatever purpose it has. For example, while both of these watering cans are nice aesthetically, one is clearly designed because of its purpose, and the other was created despite it. In other words, form follows function as a natural progression rather than just an afterthought. When Sullivan wrote this phrase, he was talking about how the exterior of a building should reflect the functions of its interior. But this principle can be extended to whatever you're designing, whether it's a building, a product, software, whatever. You want the purpose to be clear just by its visuals. Before the user even tries to use it. Designers harness the power of familiarity to achieve just that. The familiarity principle is a psychological phenomenon where mere exposure to something leads people to develop a preference or liking for it. One very apparent use of this is in UX, or user experience design. On a website, you can expect underlined words to link you to a different page because that's what we're used to. It's no surprise then that familiar design is also considered good design. Architecture is the same way. When you encounter a door like this one, you'll probably rely on your habit of pulling doors with handles similar to this one and end up embarrassing yourself for a split second, all because of that design. Integrating familiar design saves time for designers and helps lessen the learning curve for users, which is why it's fundamental for good design. Of course, there are times where companies and designers don't follow the mold of familiarity, instead opting to make something innovative as a way to entice the user into interacting with their product. This isn't a bad thing because limiting creativity and design is a negative for everyone. It's just that this is a really difficult thing to do, and even more difficult to do successfully because design often loses its authenticity and integrity for the sake of novelty. As we've talked about here, designers not only create something to be usable, they're trying to communicate a purpose. When that message is undermined by dishonest design, the quality goes down with it. For students, this is like being super confident that you aced a test, only to receive the score back and say that you missed something. Going into something with high expectations means a bigger fall when you are disappointed compared to when you have low expectations. An example is that while we know chip bags need empty space to cushion the chips from being crushed, the design is still notorious for getting people riled up because its design sets our expectations high. Dishonesty can also take the form of dark patterns, which is a term used to describe deceptive tactics that web designers use to exploit users. This can take the form of advertisements that don't really look like advertisements, or hidden costs or misdirection, which is when the focus is taken away from a specific place so they won't notice it, among other ways. In the first image, Instagram didn't have to make advertisements look like regular posts, but they chose to. The problem with dishonest design is that it takes away from the purpose and replaces it with general distrust for a product. After all, why would you need to deceive someone into buying something if it wasn't worth it already? Good design involves promising only as much as you can deliver. Why should you bother with good design anyway? Well, like I said, design conveys much more than what meets the eye. It tells us the purpose something has without ever having to interact with it. It allows for a seamless experience for all people involved, and it tells us what we can trust. We've all been designers before, whether that's in slideshow presentations, art class, science fair projects, and I'm certain we'll be tasked with creating stuff that's visually persuasive throughout the rest of our lives. While it's true that we can't predict the future, we are able to design it. Thank you.